Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. After having finished the diseases of thyroid and adrenal, I'll be covering the diseases of breast. To start with, I'll be talking on some benign breast diseases, maybe one or two classes, followed by breast cancer. Before we go into the topic proper, like what is a dictum? Before we study any surgical diseases, we should know the best possible applied anatomy of that particular organ. This holds good even for breast diseases. I am not going to tell everything about the anatomy of the breast. Which you need few points pertaining to the anatomy, what is really important as far as the case scenarios or clinical aspects are concerned. As you know, whenever we talk about breast diseases, it goes without saying it is a female breast what we are talking about. Because not many diseases which occur involvement by surgical diseases. But please remember, even though it is uncommon to have breast diseases in males, if at all, if it occurs, it is going to be a little risky disease. It is going to be a little prognostically poor disease. To give an example, CA breast in males. So coming to the anatomy, this breast is divided into different quadrants by imaginary line. By imaginary line, which divides the breast into two parts, one vertically in the center, which goes through the nipple, and one horizontal, again, which goes through the nipple. This will be asked in the examination. How do you divide? You people will be knowing that breast is divided into four quadrants, but how exactly it is divided? So it is the point which is taken into consideration is the nipple. There are no reference points above and down. There are no reference points. Roughly, this fits into mid-clavicular line. Roughly, this fits into the fourth intercostal space. But we don't take this and then divide. It is a point is the nipple. So one vertical, one horizontal, perpendicular to each other, then divide that given breast into four quadrants. If you divide, invariably it is a upper outer quadrant which has got a larger volume of the breast. Like I mentioned, it amounts to 45% of the total breast volume. Next comes the upper medial quadrant, which accounts around 15. Then comes the right lower or the lower and outer quadrant, and then the inner. So just to remember, don't by heart, just see my diagram, what I am drawing. It fits into like this. Means it is in the form of Z on the right side. It will be reverse of that on the left side. Okay, so that is a preference wise. I hope I have made it clear. So the importance of knowing this is wherever there is an increased volume of breast tissue, the diseases are more common. Hence, if you are talking about breast cancer, it is more common in the outer upper quadrant because of the more volume of breast tissue in that particular quadrant. Same explanation holds good for the lymphatics also. The amount of lymphatics which are there within the breast tissue, obviously they will be more in the upper outer quadrant within the parenchyma of the breast. There are different lymphatics which I am going to mention, but within the parenchyma of the breast, if there are lymphatics, there obviously will be more on the upper outer quadrant. this breast tissue has got three parts. Like one is the active secreting part, those are lobules. Second is the draining part, which are the ducts and ductules. Like I mentioned, it has got three parts. So this is the functional unit of a breast parenchyma. This is the lobules. These are ductules. These are the ducts. These ducts, this is the nipple. So underneath the nipple, these ducts are called lactiferous ducts. These are around 15 to 20 in number. So at the areolar level, that is subnipple area or in the subareolar area, there will be around 15 to 20 lactiferous ducts. So this drain this parenchyma here from the lobules. In between this and in between the lobuli, there is a other connected tissue called stromal tissue. This contains loose connective tissue, fat, and fibrous tissue. The reason why you should know this anatomy, simple anatomy, but important, why you should know the diseases which affect different parts of this. I said this is the whole of it is the functional part of the breast. So diseases may affect lobules, diseases may affect ductules, diseases may affect ducts, and diseases may affect stromal tissue. I will mention few points here itself. Please make a note of this. If I am talking about benign breast diseases, invariably these diseases belong to this area of the breast, that is lobules, ducts, and stroma. If I am talking about malignant disease of the breast, invariably they affect the duct system. Majority. It can be on either way, but majority benign diseases affect the periphery from the nipple-areolar area, majority wise, and a malignancy invariably they affect in the duct area. That is why whenever we talk about CA breast, we talk about infiltrating duct carcinoma. That is IDC histologically. When we talk about benign diseases or a fibroadenoma, invariably that disease affects this part of the breast. This part of that is why they are far away from the nipple-areolar complex in the breast parenchyma. There are other tumors which can be from the stroma, arising from the stroma, not very common, like any other organ, like it could be the lipomatous tissue, it could be a fibrous tissue, or it could be any connective tissue in between. To give an example, benign disease could be a phyllodes tumor. The malignant disease, it could be a sarcomatous tumor. Okay, so this is in short the histology of the breast or a histological anatomy of the breast, how it helps for the diagnosis of different surgical diseases in the breast. So after knowing this, few points on blood supply, venous drainage, and more importantly, lymphatic drainage. Blood supply about the breast is important because it is one of the highly vascularized structure which we should know. During surgery, there are chances of blood supply from all around, from superiorly, from lateral, and from midline. So from the lateral, acromiothoracic, superiorly, superior thoracic, and lateral thoracic, and in the midline, it could be from the internal mammary artery in the form of perforator branches. Okay, so it has got all supply. Okay, not many blood vessels from lower aspect, but those three areas you will have lateral, and from the posterior aspect you have got a posterior intercostal arteries which may supply the breast. Venous drainage, accordingly it goes, and ultimately they drain into axillary vein and internal mammary vein, and these venous plexus will have connection with the paravertebral plexus, that is called Batson's plexus. So one of the importance of knowing this is whenever tumor burden is more, all the vessels are studded with tumor in advanced malignancy. These, the venous which have got a connection with the posterior intercostal veins, the last one which I mentioned in this slide, posterior intercostal, they may have a connection with the paravertebral plexus, Batson plexus. Speciality of this paravertebral plexus, they don't have walls inside. So blood can flow in both the directions, above and down. So if whole of the venous structures are studded with tumor cells, and if these tumor cells are going in the posterior intercostal vein and enter into the Batson's plexus, and these are the ways of involving spine, or it can go into the central nervous system also. So this is one of the ways of involving the spine in case of CA breast. That is the importance of knowing venous drainage. Coming to lymphatic drainage, it is really important both for a clinician, oncosurgeon, and as a doctor, you need to know. And as well, this can be asked even in the examination. So to get marks also, you need to know. More than that, as a treating doctor, you need to know the lymphatic drainage. Broadly, this lymphatic drainage is divided in whole of the breast parenchyma except nipple-areolar complex. Why this is excluded from the skin and parenchyma is because these lymphatics which drain nipple and areolar complex, they go directly to the deeper lymphatics. That is why they have been, like, in a sense, they drain separately. Okay, those are called deep lymphatics. Like I mentioned, these lymphatics are divided into superficial and deep. Superficial lymphatics drain whole of the skin except nipple-areolar complex and remaining breast parenchyma. And all of these lymphatics, they go to the axilla. And I insist for the undergraduates and whoever is listening to this talk, you need to learn this, drawing this diagram whenever you have a case or even in theory examination. If you draw like this, this depicts that, yes, it is a right breast with the axilla, what you draw on the diagram. Okay. So these lymphatics, they drain primarily 80% of the lymphatics. 80% of these lymphatics, they do go to axillary group of nodes. In axillary group, you have anterior, you have lateral, you have posterior, central, and apical. Please remember, there is nothing like medial. Okay, medial almost it fits into the central group of nodes. Invariably, these are anatomically labeled, and they will have a accompanying one venous structure So through which the lymphatics, around which the lymphatic go and drain to these nodes. These nodes. These are the anatomical nodes. These are the anatomical nodes. By level wise, this is the pectoralis minor muscle. This is the axilla. This is the apex of the axilla. So the one which is lateral to pectoralis minor is level 1. The nodes which are underneath pectoralis minor, level 2, and the nodes which are medial to the medial border of pectoralis minor, they are level 3. So this is leveling. Okay. So these are the anatomical classification. And the deep lymphatics, like I said 80% of them, they go to the axillary, and remaining they may drain to internal memory, and some lymphatics may cross directly and they may go to supraclavicular nodes. Supraclavicular nodes. Few things you should remember. If you see, I said these lymphatics go mainly to axillary. Some lymphatics, they go to internal memory here. There is a plexus around or below the nipple, that is subareolar lymphatic plexus of Sapé. These plexus underneath, they may go directly into the axillary, as well they go into the internal memory, perforating intercostal space, and some lymphatics, they join the lymphatics underneath the rectus sheath. They are called subrectus sheath plexus. Subrectus sheath plexus. These may come over the costal margin. These may come perforating or piercing the diaphragm, or they may come through the foramen or a normal openings in the diaphragm, So they join subrectus sheath plexus. Once they join subrectus sheath plexus, you have a liver here and a falciform ligament, which comes to the umbilicus. And this is nothing but the tissue or a connective tissue or a ligament, which is from the parietal wall from inside the abdomen and goes over the surface of the liver and makes the anatomical two lobes, right and left. So these subrectus sheath plexus, they join with lymphatics of the falciform ligament. These subrectus sheath plexus join with the falciform ligament plexus. This falciform ligament runs over the surface of the liver and joins the lymphatics which are over Gleason's capsule. Gleason's capsule. In other words, if you trace these from subareolar plexus of Sapé, getting connected with subrectus sheath plexus, coming and joining the plexus over the falciform ligament, then coming and joining over the Gleason's capsule. This is one of the route of spread of CA breast into the liver. If this is the explanation for spread of tumor from breast to the liver, what do we expect? We expect the surface deposits. Means because the lymphatics are on the Gleason's capsule on the surface of the liver, these tumor cells will go and sit on the surface of the liver. So in a given patient, if the secondaries in the liver is in the form of nodularity, which are clinically felt or demonstrated by imaging, probably this is the way of spread. if they are deep inside, sitting deep inside the liver, probably they are of hematogenous origin. So the liver involvement in CA breast is by both means. One by lymphatic spread, second by hematogenous. The theory which favors lymphatic spread, they will have a surface nodular deposits. The theory which supports hematogenous spread, they will have inside the liver, or parenchymal deposits. Same explanation holds good for lung. Whenever you have, I said, few lymphatics pierce intercostal space. So these piercing lymphatics will spread to the pleura. More often, the parietal pleura. This is the lung. This is the inside is the visceral pleura. This is the parietal pleura, which is abutting the chest wall. So this will go to the parietal pleura. So if the tumor is getting deposited here in the parietal pleura, this will start secreting fluid because of the process, inflammatory process. So they will have pleural effusion. This is more common than hematogenous spread. In case of lung involvement, why pleural effusion is more common? This will be asked in the examination. Pleural effusion is more common than lung deposits, parenchymal deposits in CA breast. The reason is this, because it is a parietal pleural involvement is more common than lung parenchymal involvement in CA breast, which induces pleural effusion. That is why pleural effusion is more common. Understood? So the lymphatic spread is really important in CA breast. Okay. And one more point here. I said the lymphatics will cross this. They perforate either diaphragm or they get connected with subrectus sheath lymphatic plexus. So once they perforate, they come nearer the falciform ligament. If the tumor burden is more in those lymphatics, they may drop. Because they are coming into the abdominal cavity, they may get dropped into the peritoneal cavity. Once they drop, they can go and deposit over the ovaries. So this dropping of tumor cells into the peritoneal cavity, sitting on these ovaries and start growing. These tumors, we call it as Krukenberg tumor. Krukenberg tumor. To have these deposits which are sitting on the surface of the ovaries, if they really want to grow, the ovaries should be functioning ovaries because they need to secrete the nutrition, that is hormone. So only functional ovaries which are getting like ruptured now and then because of the hormonal fluctuation, which really happens in premenopausal patients, then only these tumors can grow. In other words, in case of CA breast, if you are expecting Krukenberg tumor, this happens only in premenopausal patient. That is why the dictum is you need to examine the abdominal examination for evidence of Krukenberg tumor or a pelvic mass only if the patient is premenopausal patient. In postmenopausal patient, we don't expect Krukenberg tumors because ovaries are not functioning. This is the background knowledge. Since we are accepting this theory where tumor cells are dropping into the peritoneal cavity, both ovaries are equally exposed. So the tumor, this type tumor can be bilateral. Second, If we examine these ovaries either by laparoscopy or by removing, these tumors will be on the surface, like I mentioned for the lung, on the surface. If you are accepting this hypothesis, means where tumor cells are getting dropped into the peritoneal cavity, then sitting on the ovaries, and bilaterality is known and nodularity is known. This theory of giving explanation for tumor spread into the ovaries resulting in Fruchtenberg tumor is called transcoelomic theory. Coelomic means peritoneal. Transcoelomic theory. If this is the theory which holds good with lymphatics, as well, there can be through the hematogenous route. Means tumor cells are circulating throughout the blood. So few of the tumor cells can come through ovarian artery. They enter into the ovaries and then starts growing. Okay, if this is the theory we are accepting, that is hematogenous spread, then only unilaterality is known. So in a given case, if a single ovary is involved with secondary deposits, probably it is a hematogenous route. If bilaterality is there, probably it is a lymphatic spread. So this is the importance of knowing lymphatic drainage of breast. I hope I have made it very simple and clear. Out of this, almost some 8 to 10 questions can be asked during your case discussion from this simple anatomy which I have made for undergraduates level. Coming to the topic proper, benign breast diseases. This is the commonest breast disease one can have. Around almost 30% of women will suffer from this benign breast disease in their lifetime. 30%, huge percentage. Means probably any human being with breast probably can have some amount of benign breast disease in any form during their lifetime. The most common symptom of this benign breast disease is pain, which cannot be like well defined. It's a pain in the breast, or can be a lumpy feel in the breast, or they may present with lump as well, definite lump. And many of these diseases may not require any surgical intervention, may be managed non-surgically. There are various classifications, but what I suggest, if you get this in the examination as a theory question, you need not write everything of this. You need not write everything of this. It can be the congenital anomalies, or it can be traumatic or inflammation. This is what I have written. The description is from Bailey and Lau. So if it is a theory question, every examiner expect you need to write this as it is given in Bailey and Lau. So if you can remember the congenital anomalies, which I will highlight in the next slide, what are the few important points, that is more than enough. Injury, even though it is mentioned, not very common entity, but you can mention because it is congenital, traumatic, inflammatory, and like that, it has been classified. So it is traumatic fat necrosis. Not very common, but it's a known entity. The inflammations or other benign diseases are classified under ANDI, that is aberrations in normal development and involution. In other words, what is the normal development of a breast in a female? And once the purpose is served, once the hormone levels in the body comes down, that is postmenopausal status, automatically that organ goes for involution because there are no hormone for its growth or for its activity. Breast is a hormone dependent organ. This is included under organ called surface organ. So the development and its function, both anatomy and physiology, depends on the hormone production. As long as there are hormone production in that particular female, the breast will be growing and doing its function. Once the hormone production is stopped, what I mean hormone production means functioning ovaries. Functioning ovaries. You can ask, once postmenopausal, does whole of the breast gets atrophied? It doesn't happen like that because there will be some amount of hormone production from adrenal and from subcutaneous tissue, that is estrogen and progesterone. So even though ovaries are not producing in those postmenopausal patients, because there are other sites of production, the breast will not completely get atrophied. They don't get completely. That is why there are chances patients will develop cancer even in postmenopausal period. Okay, these logic questions will be asked sometimes if you answered many other questions before. Okay. So it's a aberration. Aberration means something other than what is physiological. So it is an aberration in the development during the process and involution during regression. So if it is what is to be happen normally, if it goes out of this way, that is included under ANDI. This can be a short note for you people. So under this, there can be many other important diseases which I am going to tell later. And pregnancy related, it can be a breast abscess or it can be a galactosy. Like I mentioned, these aberrations, please remember this nice, the graph, which will give a lot of information. This is the lower part is the age of that particular patient. And this is the frequency with which these diseases occur. These are the common, the aberrations which can happen in any female. Common aberrations. Even if a girl starts menstruating at the age of around 14, 15 and starts menstruating till 40, 50 years and then attained menopause and after that lives till 90 years of age, this graph will give all the diseases. What are common diseases, both benign and malignant diseases? This is from Cardiff Breast Clinic in UK, and this is worldwide given graph for all the students. So if you can understand and reproduce during your examination, you should be getting more marks. So at the age of 15 till the 30 years of age, the fibroadenoma, one of the benign common condition, is more common in this particular age group. Just a nodularity of the breast can be common in young girls, and it can go even little bit of postmenopausal patients. Simple cysts in the breast, innocent cyst or a benign cyst, these can be in this particular age group. Please look into this, the last one, the blue color, which is the cancer. It can start from here, but the highest peak is in the postmenopausal age group. In other words, you can have one or two the competitive examination questions, logic questions out of this graph if somebody has understood this rather than by hearting. If you look into this, in a postmenopausal patient, if she comes with a breast lump, it is malignant unless otherwise proved. In a patient coming with a breast lump in the age group of 20-30 years, malignancy is less likely. You cannot say no, less likely. It is probably a benign disease. This is second. Third, it is very unlikely to have benign breast diseases in a postmenopausal patient. Very unlikely, because most of the benign breast diseases are hormone dependent. They need hormone, estrogen and progesterone hormone for their growth. So in most postmenopausal patients, they don't have a secreting hormone. Hence, benign breast diseases are less likely in a postmenopausal patient. Okay, so this is what the information you get out of this graph. Like I said, fibroadenoma is one of the commonest benign disease what we come across. As the name indicates, it has got two components, one fibrous component, the other the adenoma component. Like I had drawn that diagram in the beginning, okay, lobules and ductules and stroma. So it has got a lobular, that is adenoma, lobule secreting part, and stromal part. So that is why it is fibrous part and adenoma part. That is why fibroadenoma. Usually this presents as a smooth, discrete breast lump, which you must have seen in your wards clinical examination. Because its fibrous element is there along with the adenomatous element, and it is a very well defined, without any infiltration around into the breast tissue, it can be moved within the breast. It can be moved within the breast. That is why this is compared with breast mouse. Okay, this is compared with breast mouse. Kirtana, if you can off your video, it will be nice. It is diverting our attention. You are somewhere outside on the road and you have kept the video on. Kirtana, 63, roll number. I hope you are able to hear me. You have kept your video on. So this is called breast mouse because of its mobility within the breast parenchyma. Usually they are painless, discrete, mobile, and slowly growing. If it is asked, do they turn into malignancy? Very rarely. Don't mention one of the complications, like malignancy as one of the complications. Very rarely they can. More common between 20 and 30 years of age, and they can be smaller size, around 2 to 3 centimeters. They will be labeled as giant fibroadenomas if the size is more than 5 centimeters. Histologically, they are classified into two types, intracanalicular and pericanalicular. Pericanalicular will have a lot of fibrotic element more than the acinar or the epithelial element, but intracanalicular will have less fibrosis, more of epithelial element on histology. So if the question is asked, how are they classified? How are they classified? These are histological classifications. So if the tumor is more than 5 centimeter, like this in this picture, they are called giant fibroadenomas. And fibroadenomas, all fibroadenomas may not require treatment. Just to mention, it can be that surgical treatment or a conservative treatment. If it is like more than 3 centimeter size, some books what they mention may need surgical excision. There are other treatment modalities available, like in the form of USG guided repeated needle, the aspiration or ablation. Even cryoablation is tried for fibroadenomas. Cryoablation. Okay, so surgical excision is required more than 3 centimeter size. Giant fibroadenomas definitely needs to be excised for cosmetic purpose. And these tumors are excised with a circumareolar cosmetic incision, means around the areola, so that the incision will be cosmetic and will be able to close it nicely. Coming to few anomalies, what can happen pertaining to breast. During development, breast tissue starts from the axilla and it may extend up to the groin. This line through which this breast tissue can go is called milk line. Milk line from the axilla up to the groin. So any anomalies pertaining to breast or nipple or areolar complex can be along this line. So these are few terminologies which you may be asked, or you may have some the terminology and options down in your competitive examinations. Omastia, absence of breast, whole of the breast. This includes nipple and areola also. Polymastia, instead of 2, there can be excess number of breast with nipple and areolar complex. Earthelia, it is only the absence of nipple. Polythelia, many nipples. There can be cracked nipple, which I will show you the slides and I will mention few points. The nipple can be retracted. Cracked means the surface of the nipple will have a crack. Retracted, the nipple has, rather than getting protruded out, it can go inside. This can be retracted nipple, could be either localized to part of the nipple or it can be whole of the nipple. That whole of the nipple is called circumferential retraction, which is pathognomic of breast cancer. And there can be nipple discharge. Sometimes this breast tissue, which is there around, can herniate through the areola. This is one of the typical photograph showing the breast tissue herniates through this. We see these cases during in your clinical course. So this is called tubular or tuberous breast. Tubular breast means breast tissue coming out of the areola and hanging like this. This is not pathological. There is no disease inside. There is no disease inside. It is only for the cosmetic purpose. It has got importance. Also, this is called a Snoopy-nosed syndrome. Snoopy-nosed syndrome. So this is. So what we do, we correct this surgically. We push this everything, and whatever this herniation, we block that and close that nipple areolar complex over that. So cosmetically, it is important. Like I mentioned, there can be absence of breast tissue. This entity wherein during development, along with the breast tissue, that part of the pectoralis major, which has got a sternal head. If you see this, this is the sternum. If you see this, this is the normal breast. Here there is no breast tissue, and you can see there is concavity here. Means the pectoralis major, which takes origin from the sternum like this, is absent. So absence of pectoralis major or a non-development of sternal head. Sternum. There is one more head called clavicular head here. So sternal head of pectoralis major with overlying breast tissue absent. This is called Pollard's syndrome. You will have this MCQ. Pollard's syndrome. This is more commonly, it happens in males. In males. There can be other anomalies in the form of idiopathic asymmetry. For no reasons, there will be one will be a bigger breast, one can be a smaller breast. Bilateral amastia in a female, both the breasts are absent. Unilateral amastia, one breast is absent. There can be accessory breasts, which are more common site for accessory breast is axilla. To label that it's a breast, you should have a nipple areolar complex. Okay. One of the speciality of this is whenever these patients during menstruation, these changes in these breasts, also there can be changes in this also. If the lady is lactating, there can be lactation from these breasts also. If a lady is getting the menstruation cyclical mastalgia or pain in the breast, she can have pain in this breast also. Okay, that is. And a gynecomastia, which I mentioned, is a separate entity, which I will be covering later. It is exclusively this terminology should be used for males. That is enlargement of breast tissue in males is gynecomastia. Coming to few of the infection varieties, mastitis of infancy, mastitis, breast abscess, and perirectal mastitis. Mastitis of infancy, more common in during immediately after birth. Immediately after birth. This is because of the maternal hormones. Maternal hormones. So, in utero, the newborn or a fetus will have hormones, the maternal hormones in the circulation. After delivery, this will be there for 3 days. So, during 3 days, these may act on the breast. So, there can be a milky or serous discharge from the nipple. And there can be breast enlargement. Please remember, this also can be a question for you. This happens both in male and female children. So, mastitis of infancy, it is not a disease of the female child. It is both male and female because maternal hormones can act on both the child. So, it happens in both. So, mastitis of infancy. Sometimes they may result in abscess formation and may need intervention. In adults, mastitis and breast tissue, mastitis and breast abscess, more common during lactation. Lactation. So, mastitis may be the initial phase to start with. Then it can be a cellulitis phase. Then it can be a frank abscess formation. So, this could be because of spreading infection from the child's mouth organisms. Child's mouth organism through the ducts in the nipple. If a lady or a mother has a cracked nipple, these organisms from the baby's mouth can go into the nipple and then ascend up and cause all the problems within the breast. The periductal mastitis is a definite entity. Before periductal mastitis, few points about the acute mastitis which I have described just now. The infection from the duct, it will go, and once there is infection within the cracked nipple area in the duct system, the milk which is there within the duct will be coagulated by these organisms. That becomes a plug. That becomes a plug. So it blocks that duct. So the milk secretion which is there beyond will not be drained out. And this infection will go and a stagnated milk becomes infected and patient may develop breast abscess. So this is the mechanism of development of acute mastitis followed by breast abscess in a lactating breast. Like I mentioned, duct ectasia or periductal mastitis are definite entities. Usually the pathology is there can be primary duct dilatation or there can be the inflammation around the duct. This is a specific disease which is more common in smokers. More common in smokers. Invariably, these patients presents with pain in the breast, discharge from the nipple, and subareolar abscess or a lump, small lump. So they will have a nipple discharge, they will have a subareolar abscess. They will have subareolar, tender, lump, maybe abscess, and pain and pain. And these patients can have the pain in the whole of the breast, or if these subareolar abscess is not treated at this stage of the disease, that will burst open, results in fistula formation. That we call it as the memory fistula. Okay. So this entity, which is more common in smokers, is called Juska's disease, periductal mastitis with subareolar abscess. Juska's disease. Like I mentioned, here the duct, over the duct, there will be periductal inflammation. This will get blocked and this gets dilated. This dilatation could be primary or it could be secondary to periductal inflammatory process. And once it is dilated, there will be stagnation of these secretions within the duct and they get infected and results in this abscess formation. This abscess, if it is not treated, this opens into the surface, resulting in fistula. This is called memory fistula. Okay, so this is the, you may have competitive examination, same diagram will be given. Same diagram will be given and there can be 2-3 questions underneath. There is a specific procedure for this periductal mastitis, wherein because it is the duct disease, like what I explained in the anatomy, duct disease, there is collection and the process or the pathology or the disease process within that segment of those ducts underneath nipple-areolar complex. What they do, they take a subareolar incision or circumareolar incision like this. Then this flap is raised. Those duct systems are isolated and cone of breast tissue from here, including the ducts which are there in that segment till the pectoralis fascia is whole of it is excised, then sutured back again, keeping the contour of the breast. This procedure, which is used for treatment of duct ectasia or the periduct mastitis, is called Hadfield operation. This also you may have a competitive examination question. Hadfield operation. This is called Hadfield operation for periductal mastitis. Like I mentioned, ANDI, that is aberration in normal development and involution. The pathology in that could be under these 4 types. Under these 4 types. It could be a simple cyst formation, which is more common in postmenopausal patients. Postmenopausal patient. This could be a fibrosis. This could be a lot of fibrosis. So there is more of fibrotic element than an epithelial element. So may mimic cancer. May mimic cancer. There can be hyperplasia or atypia. Again, this can be mistaken with cancer because there is cellular atypia if you do a biopsy of that. There can be papillomatosis. This more happens in duct system. In other words, if you see this ANDI, what I explained that in the anatomy, This can be anywhere from this to this area. If during development, it is more of a stromal tissue. During lactation and post-lactation, it is a more of a alveolar tissue. Alveolar tissue. This functional unit, which I said, it becomes more during the middle of the lactation period. To begin with, before breast starts lactating, it is a stromal growth. Stromal growth. So the disease per se, whether this is happening during development, whether this is happening during involution, accordingly you will have these 4 elements. Okay, accordingly you will have. So hyperplasia, multiplication during development. Okay, cyst formation during involution. That is why it is important to know the anatomy. So ultimately this ANDI is alteration in the anatomy of the breast depending on the hormonal status of that particular woman. Clinical features, invariably they present with history of pain in the breast, which we have a variation depending on the period timings. They may have heavy breast, or they may have a lumpy feel in the breast, or they can have a nodularity of the breast. And this may have association with nipple discharge. May be there, may not be there. So these are the common clinical features of this ANDI. Like I mentioned, the nipple retraction, this can be the slit retraction, wherein if you see this diagram, there is a smiling or a slit in the nipple. It is maybe a physiological, or it could be a secondary to infection, and this may have an associated fistula like this in this particular case. So invariably they are benign diseases, nothing to be done. If it is a circumferential retraction like this, they indicate underlying breast cancer. So, one. Second, you should ask, like I mentioned, nipple retraction, type of nipple retraction. Is it slit, circumferential? If it is a circumferential, invariably it indicates that there is an underlying malignancy. Next point you should ask, how it is happened. Is it recent or many years or since birth or since adulthood? What is more important is recent retraction. So if it is a recent circumferential retraction, it is malignancy. There is an underlying malignancy that has involved the duct system and that has resulted in retraction. That is the importance of knowing. So that is why in the history, whenever you present a case of breast lump, if there is a history of nipple retraction, you should ask what is the duration. So recent retraction becomes an important history in that particular case. Next commonest, the benign problem to which the patients may come is the nipple discharge. This is list of diseases. Again, this is from Bailey and Love, which I have put list of diseases which can have nipple discharge. But out of them, the common varieties which can result in the nipple discharge, different nipple discharges, fibrocystic disease, duct ectasia, periductal mastitis, duct papilloma, lactation, and carcinoma sometimes can have a nipple discharge. So these are common diseases or common entities which can have nipple discharge. You can classify, or you can put as a common causes, or you can put like I mentioned, the nipple discharge as common causes, or you can put causes depending on type of discharge. The type of discharges can be serous discharge, can be bloody discharge, can be purulent discharge, can be milky discharge. If it is a serous discharge, the commonest cause for serous discharge, duct ectasia, wherein there is dilatation of the duct system. Duct ectasia or fibrocystic disease. Fibrocystic disease. And sometimes even cancer can have a serous discharge. Bloody discharge, invariably it is a duct papilloma, wherein there is a small tumor within the duct, so that may cause papilloma. So whenever the patient comes with the bloody discharge, try to palpate underneath areola. Is there any palpable small nodule? Sometimes cancer can have, but not many breast cancers will have a bloody nipple discharge. One more, the cause for serous discharge is Paget's disease. Anyone can answer? I mentioned Paget's disease. I'm talking about nipple discharge. Any logic question anyone can question? You can unmute and ask the question. Yeah, you can chat in the box. Probably it is, we have muted all your audios. You can put in the chat box. What my question is, I said serous discharge, we are talking about nipple discharge. So serous variety discharge, I have given Paget's disease as one of the causes. Is it logical? So it doesn't look logical because in Paget's disease, there won't be any nipple. There will be destruction of the nipple. In other words, any discharge, serous discharge in the nipple areolar area, what I meant was, okay, so what I wanted from you people, there won't be any nipple. So how can it be a nipple discharge causes? Okay. The purulent discharge may be periductal mastitis or acute mastitis. Milky discharge, put milky discharge, lactation as the cause. Don't put galactosile. Case of galactosile will not have milky discharge. Okay. I think for you people, I'll take out these Paget's. Unnecessarily, you people will be misguided and you will do mistakes. Okay. Keep this duct ectasia and fibrocystic disease and cancer one of the causes for serous discharge. The assessment, nipple discharge. Or evaluation of nipple discharge. Evaluation depends on type of discharge, age of patient, and number of ducts involvement. Number of duct involvement. Okay. After doing this type of discharge and age, if you have diagnosed that patient has got ectasia or mastitis or other causes like papilloma, you have come to a diagnosis after imaging and after diagnosis. The further treatment depends on the number of duct involved. Is it a single duct disease or a multiple duct disease? Okay. If it is single duct disease, then there is a procedure called microdocectomy. Means what do they do? If this is the nipple and a single duct is getting discharged, they pass a wire, nylon wire or an instrument through this wire and they excise this duct, single duct. That is called microdocectomy. If it is multiple duct, then procedure done is cone excision. If there are multiple ducts, they take out that segment of the nipple along with the ducts underneath. For example, if this is the nipple and this is the areola and there are 2-3 ducts in this segment of the nipple are involved, this whole thing of it is excised. And then again this and this are sutured. This is called cone excision if there are multiple duct disease. Okay, so that is a treatment. One of the principle of evaluation of nipple discharge is cancer should not be missed. Means whatever the type of discharge, except the milk discharge during lactation, whatever the discharge, from the secretion, cytology has to be done. Fluid cytology has to be done. So look for malignant cells and then do this. There is one more procedure recently for a nipple discharge called ductoscopy. Means they pass a fiber optic scopes through the duct and see the pathology and treat accordingly. If there is a papilloma, we can excise using a ductoscopy, microductoscopy. Whatever the diseases you have in the breast, ultimately for the clinician, what is important? You must be hearing me telling in the clinical postings, the criteria of examining of any breast diseases is not to miss breast cancer. That should be the ultimate aim of every clinician. We are irrespective of the age. Even though I have mentioned this particular age group, this particular disease, that is theoretical knowledge. That doesn't mean that one should not have a particular disease in particular age. Everybody has the right to have every disease at any time. So the primary aim of the clinical examination or evaluation of a breast disease is not to miss the diagnosis of breast cancer. So keeping that in mind, the people have come out with an assessment which is being taught as medical students and as well as to the other consultants called triple assessment. Means there are 3 ways of assessing of any breast disease or a breast lump where we can detect the diseases. So what are the parts of this evaluation? One is the clinical examination. Good clinical examination. Second is imaging. Third is having a histological diagnosis. Histological. Clinical examination, what we teach you people, that is with a consent in a good, illuminated room and in different ways of examination. Okay, that's what it means. So here, the age of the patient, that will reflect on the menopausal status, pre or post, then examination findings, which usually we teach in clinical methods. So depending on these 2 entities, you take. Along with that, there is plenty of things like history also is included. family history. There are so many things, whether patient comes into risk category or not. So all are included under clinical entity, whatever we deal in a clinical case. Followed by, in that particular, after doing that, then submit these patient on imaging. One is USG of the breast, that is sonomammogram. Then submit the patient for X-ray mammography. X-ray mammography, wherein we do X-rays of the breast, both craniocaudal and mediolateral views. They have got their own findings, which we'll be telling later. So depending on that, you decide. Pathologically, we put a needle, that is FNEC or a core cut needle biopsy, and then come to a diagnosis. See here in this, the diagnosis will be around 99.9%. That is why this triple assessment is very important. Okay, so this is both as a clinician you should know, and as a student you may be asked in your theory examination, and you need to draw this flow chart that will give you full marks. Okay. So with this, I think I will be concluding today's class about benign breast diseases, which I have covered in a short way, so that you people can remember, and the remaining classes will be taken later. And one instruction I would like to give for the evening class, if somebody, whoever is interested or whoever has been posted, I don't want to restrict to any person who have posted to the surgery postings. So if someone is presenting nicely and if you are interested, then only the clinics will be taken in the evening hours. Thank you.